Good morning. Right, it's morning. Now, today, I want to talk to you about the little things that we do in our spare time. You could call these your hobbies, your pastimes, maybe even your passions or your talents. And I want to share with you a new way to look at these things. So here's a story that begins with a question. And it's a very common question. Most of us have probably heard it at some point in our life from our relatives, our parents, our friends. And here's the question. What would you like to be when you grow up? So it was a friend who asked me this question. And at that point in time, I was still pretty young. And I just stared back at him. And he thought he would give me some guiding statements. He said, oh, just think about what you like to do now. And then you'll figure out what you want to do for the rest of your life. So I thought, okay, that's great. I knew my answer immediately. I was a very passionate artist since I was 4 years old. I drew a lot. And so I told him, dude, you think I could be an animator? But then his expression dropped. And he pointed out something that just left me devastated. He said, dude, you don't even take art class. So, yeah, I was really disappointed. I wandered around aimlessly, clinging on to a desperate dream, because afterwards, I still really liked drawing. And it seemed like so many others still face and are still facing a similar crisis in their lives. Because I see all of my friends around me who have developed amazing hobbies. They dance with real charisma. They play musical instruments with very spiritedly, and you can see the fire in their eyes when they do these kind of things. That's when you know what kind of passions they have. But still, at some point, somebody told them that you're sort of stuck in an academic pathway. And they tell them, you're just not going down that path. Just try something else. And these people aren't kidding, because if you just do a quick Google search on the relevant statistics, employability, and all that kind of things, you just realize that there's a real risk in making a life career out of these non-academic pathways, like the performing arts, the visual arts, sports, these kind of things. And it's just like that. But these friends of mine, and I believe millions of others outside as well, just go on with their lives looking for an aspiration considered acceptable. And when they do, when they grow up, they'll probably just dream of a happier self in an alternate universe, just enjoying their dream job. And this is the problem I'd like to highlight today, the problem of passions fading away in our youth. But I realized a while ago that it doesn't have to be that way. It's not about a dichotomy where we decide whether we want a job that's really risk-heavy or a job that's really menial, it's well-paying, but we just don't like to do it, and all the rest of our hobbies, the ones that define us, just fade away. Right? So in economics, we learn about something called opportunity costs. Right? So we have a couple of choices, and then we have limited resources, and then maybe we have to end up picking one and forego the rest of them. But if you think about it, the ideas that go on in our head, that is our aspirations, don't really get limited in this way. Opportunity cost doesn't apply. For the simple reason that, one, our ideas aren't tangible, and two, they're not really limited by any resources, which means that you can actually do a lot of things with the ideas and the aspirations that go on in your head. For example, you can merge them. So here's an example of what you can do. Right? Here's a list of academic pursuits that people are studying right now. And you're just looking at this list, and you're just thinking what some of the items on this list actually are. I didn't know some of them until I went to research for the purposes of this speech. But here they are. You can study them. And there are people studying them as we speak, as you're listening to my talk now, there are people listening to a lecture on these subjects. You can do them. And the important thing here is that every item on this list seems to incorporate some kind of common hobby into them. For example, whoever went to pursue sports science probably had some degree of interest in sports, and so they made the conscious decision to incorporate that into their academic pursuits. So how do we do this? How do we make that intuitive leap to just go and study these things that just go according to our hobbies? Right? So I figured out a way to do this recently, and it's very fun. Just try it out at home. So grab a huge blank piece of paper and maybe some writing materials, and then the first thing you list out is the things that you do with your spare time. It can be anything, right? It can be maybe just daydreaming, maybe you compose music in your head, or maybe you have real passions that you follow throughout your life, drawing, dancing, anything. And if you're not sure whether to include something in that list, just include it. The list should be as long as possible. Right? So next to that, you'll put down a list of academics, the ones that you're pretty okay with studying in class. Maybe you even enjoy them, and that's pretty good. Right? It can be anything, that's up to you. So here's the catch. What you'll do now is grab your pencil, pen, whatever, and you'll draw a line between two selected items on the list. Now here's the thing. Think about it. Is there any way to merge these two fields? Just think about it. Google it if you have to. The sports science guy probably did something like this. He had one sport at the hobby side, a science at the academic side. He merged it together and he found sports science. So if you don't manage to make a connection between these two items, that's fine. You can just pick another pair and try and link those together. But if you do manage to find a connection, that's good for you. And in fact, you can even find that new merged item and you can continue to merge it with something else on the list. So to illustrate what I'm talking about, I'll use my own list of hobbies and academics as an example. So as a kid, 4 years old, the two things I was interested in was drawing and math. So I was a very conflicted kid, and it took me a while to figure out the connections. So here's the path I had to take throughout about 10 plus years. The fortunate thing was that I didn't have to immediately make the connection. There were other hobbies to explore with. So the first one was comic books, or to be more specific, Japanese manga. Right? I have a full set of Dragon Ball at home, etc., etc., a couple of Pokemon. And yeah, if you merge those two, you get a very intuitive connection. Yeah. I drew about 20-something episodes since I was 9 years old. I enjoyed it a lot. And that brought me to the aspiration that was animation. I was trying to consider it, but that brought me to the conversation that I mentioned to you earlier. It just wasn't a viable career to me, as somebody pointed out. So fine, I just moved on to something else. Boys my age, I'm a really typical guy. I just play video games as well. And if you merge that with drawing, you actually get this. Pixel art is the kind of artwork you see in video games that are pretty low resolution, maybe in your Game Boy, and the kind you see in Pokemon. I showed you a few examples, but I just didn't happen to have this. Right, so once I had the art assets for a video game, I just figured out, why not just move on and make an actual video game? So this was interesting as well, of course, and that brought me to programming, which is the logic language involved in making video games. And here I figured out that I was starting to get onto something, because here I'm approaching the left brain side of my hobbies. And if you merge programming with a lot of math, a lot of calculus, you actually get computer science, which is a very viable career. It pays very well, right? So after taking a huge roundabout, I found myself here, and I finally figured out what I wanted to study at the university level, which was pretty good. And in fact, I even know what courses to take at university. And here's where it comes full circle, isn't it? Because computer science is used heavily in animation. And that thing is called computer graphics and simulation. The Pixar movies you see, if you've ever wondered how, like let's say Monsters University, how Sully's fur moves, or maybe in Pirates of the Caribbean, how the fluid mechanics work, that's all owing to computer graphics and simulation. So there it is. That's the ultimate merger between drawing and maths, my two childhood interests. It's right there in that box. Right? So this whole thing is what I call your personal web. And just try it at home. It's really interesting. And it's particularly valuable because every item on that list represents the collection of interests that are unique to you. And every connection you see in that web represents the thought processes that are also unique to you. And if you manage to make the connection until you can find a viable life career, then that's even better, like it did for me. And the best part is that you can manage to incorporate all of your hobbies and your interests along the way. So what this thing represents here is your identity. It's the list of things that drive you as a person every day. So if you ever feel very confused about your hobbies, maybe you just don't find them as a viable life career, maybe you just have too many, maybe you have too little, you have no idea what you like to do in your spare time, just try and map yourself your own personal web. I believe that it will bring you endless possibilities to each and every one of you, because we are all a unique collection of interests that drive us every day. And the most important part is for us to keep discovering about ourselves and our potential. Thank you.